dire countries. But otherwise, I tried to really let go of any preconceived notions because I did have family members who would warn me, oh, it's dangerous, you know, you should be careful, especially with the World Cup. But I did go with an open mind, went against my parents' wishes, and flew away the day after finals, just telling them to drop me off at the airport. So I ended up getting there, and immediately the first day, our first week was in Johannesburg. What I was most shocked about was the resemblance to Los Angeles, and how so everywhere gates everywhere, which was something so unfortunate that I noticed because people really weren't walking around. Everyone was either jumping in the taxis, jumping in the vans, and what I have to say is that the transportation within the cities was really easy. I literally only spent a few cents for every ride to get around from different cities using the mass transportation. But in addition to that, we started off digging in an anthropological site in the cradle of humankind, where some of the first ancestors, I don't want to butcher the names, especially if you're studying anthropology, but yes, I don't remember them right now. But yes, we were digging, and it was just something glorious for us, because I think as people, as students who have grown up studying history, going all the way back to Africa, it was something that was rewarding, because we didn't anticipate being students actually being involved in something that was curated by the University of Witwatersrand and also the museums all over the country and all over the world. So that was a fascinating introduction. What I do have to say is that we were also traveling with local African students from all over the country, and in addition to that from Botswana and Mozambique. So we had students that were able to educate us on what the local customs were, and in addition to that give us their own advice on how to be careful and be safe, but also have as much fun. Because I did the UVA in Southern Africa program. So along with earning 6 credits for environmental science and anthropology, our main focus was on the people, culture, and environment of Southern Africa, which of course is very broad. But our main goal at the end of the day was global development work, community service, and engaging with communities. So after that first week, scratching the surface, really getting used to South Africa on the urban level in Johannesburg, of course we had our good times, we were able to go out, but of course we were still studying, learning about AIDS, learning about the different populations, and which was really important to me because as a Filipino, I was the only Asian American on the program. And when I had come, I had no idea how I would be interpreted as a person, but what I had learned was that there was not only a colored population, which in South Africa is the mixed race population, which really resembled me. Resemble what I look like, a Filipino would look like, or someone that's Malay. And in addition to that, the huge Indian diaspora that's also in South Africa, that it was such a diverse place with 11 different official languages that I had so much to learn and soak in such a short time that first week was I was never to sleep. Always excited, always ready to get out, getting to the apartheid museums and learning as much as possible. But when we really did, after we did scratch the surface and get to know students at the University of Johannesburg and the University of Witwatersrand, we moved into a rural area. And that's where I actually was able to see Anne. Because while Anne was doing her project in Limpopo province, which was about 4 hours northeast of Johannesburg, we were able to work with communities, and actually we were tutored at the University of Venda how to engage with communities, how to have respect for them, and not really to take away all of the power they had, but really to empower them and be their partners in setting up programs. So if we were to come back, we would be able to apply to JPC grants and any other grants that were available from any corporation, university, or outside program. So when we were there, we were able to not only bond with the University of Venda students, but we lived in a very secluded area, and in that secluded area we were able to really work. We were always studying, we were being tested, and we were also introduced to a lot of entrepreneurs and NGOs that would come and visit us and give us presentations. For example, taking baobab oil and taking that baobab oil and transforming it into something that could be sellable to the Western markets, but also empowering women and letting the women take advantage and work, the local women take advantage and work in these different, the different farming lands for the baobab trees. Because as you know, South Africa has, it was actually for us winter there, so it was very cold for us, and we although that we were always awake, we were always struggling to not only stay in touch, but also to keep warm and to make sure that we were always retaining all of the information, because there was so much coming to us in this program. And then after that, after we engaged the students and did learn about various NGOs, our third week we traveled to Mozambique, which I think was the most, I would believe, according to my friends and my family, would be the most stereotypical place. A place that really was so underdeveloped that once we crossed over the border of Mozambique, we were faced with going over dirt roads and having a lot of trouble with convoys. I mean, even when we were going through national parks, we had flat tires, we would get stuck. But what I won't say is that didn't discourage us. What that gave us was a lot of time to work on the buses. So every time we were in the convoys, we were studying, always in discussion with our professors and with our TAs. So we were always engaging. And when we weren't falling asleep, because we were so exhausted from staying awake, I was with literally 17 other students. And as you can tell from going from Johannesburg to another week in Limpopo, to another week in Mozambique, it was just not necessarily culture shock, but an intense immersion that really was pushing us to stay awake. And not only was it enlightening, but once we had arrived, it was completely rural. It was a community that was devastated by being forced out of their local home area that had been transformed into a trans frontier park, and put into this section where it was completely dry and arid, facing issues and conditions where they were facing water issues of lack of transportation to health facilities, and in addition to that, among many more, issues of having accessibility for their children to go to college or to go to high school, because Maputo was about 4 or 5 hours away, and that's where the only university was. And in addition to that, there was only one school in the local area. And when I was with the Kanhani tribe, we did live in tents. Well, at least the boys did. The females were allowed to live in rooms. So the boys did have to struggle a little bit. I mean, I had to set up my own tent. But even though we did take a lot of cold showers, yes, it was okay. It was a lot of fun. I did have to set up my own tent. What I have to say was, we did attend a lot of cultural events. So in addition to really engaging communities and practicing what we had learned from previous weeks, because if you can tell, it was a build-up. Week 1, history of the local area of Southern Africa. Week 2, learn what we're supposed to do, and then week 3, we were actually interacting with communities, the Kanhani tribe, the Kanhani Kovani tribe, and literally being able to situate ourselves in this community and develop projects. So we actually did that. We presented with communities, even though we couldn't speak Portuguese, and which was trouble for us. But what I have to say was, one of the great things about the program, if you do decide to take it, is that, like I said, 2 students came from Mozambique and traveled with us. But what was a great surprise was that 10 more students came from the Universidade Eduardo Mondlane, which is in Maputo, and they traveled with us through Mozambique, I mean, not through Mozambique, but through the Massanger area, and through Mozambique when we were traveling into different rural areas to kind of compare and contrast what really is succeeding in the local communities. But we were learning so much and really being able to engage, because not only did we have our friends that translated for us, but I had friends that had personally tutored myself, which I always greatly appreciate. But then the next week, after that had finished, we had to submit various different proposals, because obviously we had various capstones that we had to complete and different projects. Because of course it is 6 credit, 400 level. It's a serious class, I won't lie. We ended up in Mpumalanga province. And in Mpumalanga we were able to finally relax. But most of all, when we were traveling around, was that we engaged with NGOs that were more structured, because we were back in South Africa. And at that point we were in a local area where a lot of the farmlands would really resemble what you could imagine in America. It was a great resemblance to kind of Napa Valley, at least the NGO I was working with. And the NGO I worked with AIDS workers and AIDS expatriates, and also immigrants, and also legal immigrants who really needed jobs and had to go back to their families. And it was actually partnered with the Peace Corps. So I know we had brought up Peace Corps here, but literally this program had introduced me to so many different opportunities to not only come back to Africa, but to literally engage in various communities and have different perspectives of how different people are working with one another. So eventually, of course, the program did end. And what was interesting was that I have to say that the World Cup was occurring. So we did see a great transformation, a complete facelift, because according to our colleagues, before South Africa got in the World Cup, it was, I won't say devastated, but it wasn't as developed as people would want it to be for the World Cup. But the World Cup literally funded a lot of money, and I have to say everywhere, the pride was everywhere, music was always in the streets. And whether you imagine the Vuvuzela, what I always take away with me is that although that was all happening, I was still able to create bonds with the students at the various universities that I'd gone to, and actually take my own initiative to do personal research. So we did have a final capstone for the whole course, kind of discussing and discoursing what we had learned and how we would implement it. But what I had noticed was that I was able to travel around for the 4 weeks, like I had said, by myself, and implement a lot of information that I had learned and practice it in Xhosa villages and also Chivenda villages, and not only but see Anne in Cape Town. And what I have to say, and I'll end with this because I know we've gone through so much, is that I had a great support system of not only my fellow friends that I bonded with that were local Africans, I mean Africans in terms of Botswanan and also Mozambican and South African, but that I had UVA alumni and UVA students that were there with me. One of Whitney's best friends was there with me too when I was in Cape Town. So what I always have to say is what I took away is there's always a support system, and definitely use your connections, because it was really important, and now I want to go back, and I really yearn to. Thank you.
Yeah, you all have had such incredible